You know, I just said what I said and it was wrong.
Hello, and welcome to my Beatles YouTube channel. If you like the Beatles, please make sure you subscribe and you check out my other videos because I'm sure you're gonna find them interesting. Today we're gonna talk about the top 10 Beatles controversies. Now, before we start, I'd like to make a few things perfectly clear. First of all, I love the Beatles. It's literally my favorite band in the entire world, and this whole YouTube channel is dedicated to the Beatles. I love them and I'm not judging them in any way. Another thing I like to clarify is that everything we're going to talk about today are actual facts. I'm not making anything up and I'm not exaggerating the facts just to fit the story, none of that. Everything we're going to talk about today comes from books, interviews and other reliable sources. So let's start. Number 1. Adultery. The Beatles had never been particularly faithful to their wives and girlfriends. I dare say monogamy gets a little bit harder when you're a Beatle. John Lennon, for example, attended a dinner party once together with Yoko, and he ended up going to one of the bedrooms to have sex with one of the guests, even though Yoko was there and everyone could hear them from the dining room. This is just one example, but I want to talk about adultery within the group. More specifically, the fact that George Harrison had an affair with Maureen Starkey, Ringo Starr's wife. That was in the early 1970s and Ringo was devastated. But he ended up saying, well, better you than someone else. Eventually, George and Ringo reconcile, although Ringo and Maureen ended up getting divorced, and so did George and his first wife, Patty. Number 2. Violence. Here I'm talking specifically about John Lennon. John was an aggressive guy, especially in his younger years. In the book John and Paul, A Love Story in Songs, the author, Ian Leslie, says John Lennon was aggressive and was always picking fights, but somehow never ended up actually fighting. He was not a particularly tough guy, and he always relied on other friends to help him out of trouble. However, on one occasion, he went a bit too far. I'm talking about Paul McCartney's 21st birthday party. Bob Wooler, who was the Cavern Club DJ, made a cheeky comment about John going on holiday with Brian. He probably said something like, "How was your honeymoon?" Brian Epstein being a gay man, John Lennon didn't like this at all and beat up Bob Wooler so badly that he had to be taken to hospital. Luckily for the Beatles, the press didn't make a big thing out of this because it could have easily been the end of the band. In her book John, Cynthia Powell, John Lennon's first wife, talks about how John Lennon hit her once. If I remember correctly, John Lennon was really jealous because he saw Cynthia dance with someone else. In an interview John Lennon gave shortly before his assassination, he said he was a violent man and he used to fight men and hit women.
You know, I was a hitter. I couldn't express myself, and I fought men, I hit women, I was violent. That's why I'm always on about peace. You see, it's the most violent people that go for love and peace. And I sincerely believe in love and peace, but I am absolutely a violent man who has learned not to be violent and regrets his violence.
Number 3. Incest. John Lennon once said something very particular about his mother, Julia. I could tell you, but I think it best if you just hear it for yourself.
So I was just remembering the time when I had my hand on my mother's. It's when I was about 14. Took a day off school. I was always doing that and hanging out in her house. And we were lying on the bed and I was thinking, I wonder if I should do anything else. And it was a strange moment because I actually had the hots, as they say, for some rather lower class female that lived on the opposite side of the road. But I always think that I should have done it, presuming she would have allowed it.
Hi, sorry to interrupt the video. Just a very quick, very important announcement. I published a book. That's right, I published a book. It's called From the Cavern to Abbey Road, A Journey Through the Beatles' Iconic Landmarks. In this book, we see the story of the Beatles from the places where everything happened. Some of them are famous, like let's say Abbey Road Studios, and some of them perhaps not so famous, like for example the art gallery where John and Yoko met. I put a lot of work and effort into this book, and it would help me so much if you grabbed a copy. It's available on Amazon all around the world, so if you want your copy, please go to the link in the description. Thank you. Now back to the video. Number 4. Paul McCartney talks about LSD. In 1967, Paul McCartney was asked by a reporter if he had ever done LSD, and he said yes. The reporter said that he would encourage kids to do LSD, and Paul McCartney said, listen, if you're so concerned about that, don't show this in the news. You have the choice not to spread this now. They asked him a question and he gave them an honest answer. He could have lied, but he decided to tell the truth. The funny thing is that Paul McCartney was actually the last Beatle to try LSD. All the other Beatles have been doing it for several months, and Paul was a bit reluctant to try it. But he was the one who talked about it on TV.
But you're a public figure and you said it in the first place, and you must have known that it would have made the newspapers.
Yes, but to say it, is only to tell the truth. I'm telling the truth, I don't know what everyone's so angry about.
Well, do you think you have now encouraged your fans to take drugs?
I don't think it'll make any difference, I don't think my fans are going to take drugs just because I did, But the thing is, that's not the point anyway, I was asked whether I had or not. And then from then on, the whole bit about how far it's going to go and how many people it's going to encourage is up to the newspapers and up to you, on television. I mean, you're spreading this now at this moment. This is going into all the homes, in Britain. And I'd rather it didn't, But you're asking me the question. You want me to be honest. I'll be honest,
But as a public figure, surely you've got a responsibility to lots and
No,
lots
it's
of
you've
teenagers.
got the responsibility. You've got the responsibility not to spread this now. I'm quite prepared to keep it as a very personal thing, if you will too. If you'll shut up about it, I will.
Number 5. The Beatles' drug arrests. In 1968, when John and Yoko were living at 34 Montague Square, a flat in Marylebone, London, that was leased by Ringo Starr, the flat was raided by the police, and John and Yoko were arrested for cannabis possession. Apparently, the drugs were planted by Sergeant Norman Pilcher. I'm not saying John and Yoko didn't do drugs, but these particular drugs the police found were said to be planted by Norman Pilcher, who didn't like rock stars at all. John pleaded guilty to protect Yoko, because as a Japanese citizen, her stay in the country could have been compromised. He had to pay a fine of £500, which even in 1968 wasn't too much money for a rock star like John Lennon. However, this drug conviction was what the American government used as an excuse not to grant him a green card. John Lennon, who wanted to live in America, kept appealing until he finally got a green card. In March 1969, Norman Pilcher, the same police officer, raided George and Patty's house, and they were also arrested for cannabis possession. George also said that the drugs had been planted. He had to pay a fine of £250, and Patty Boyd had to pay a fine of £50. Number 6. Paul McCartney drug arrests. Paul managed to stay out of trouble during the Beatles years. However, after the Beatles breakup, he got arrested several times for cannabis possession. In 1972, he got in trouble for growing marijuana in his farm in Scotland.
It was said that those seeds had been sent to you. How did you come to grow them?
Yeah, well, we got a load of seeds, kind of in the post, and we didn't know what they were, we kind of planted them all, and 5 of them came up illegal.
Some years later, he got arrested in LA for cannabis possession, and in 1984, he got arrested at Barbados airport for cannabis possession.
This, I'm telling you, this substance, cannabis, is a whole lot less harmful than rum punch, whiskey, nicotine, and glue, all of which are perfectly legal. I would like to see it decriminalized, because I don't think in the privacy of my own room I was doing anyone any harm whatsoever.
However, the most infamous of his drug arrests was in Japan in 1980 when they found quite a lot of weed in his suitcase. I'm talking a quantity big enough to charge him with drug smuggling, and he spent 9 days in prison. However, he was facing a very long prison sentence, but luckily for us, the fans, he didn't go to prison in the end. I suppose being a Beatle helped. Number 7. The Beatles in the Philippines. In 1966, when the Beatles went to the Philippines, they were invited by Imelda Marcos, the president's wife, to a very important event in the palace. The Beatles didn't like this sort of commitments, so they did not accept the invitation. However, Imelda Marcos did not take no for an answer and sent the police to get the Beatles, who didn't even know they were expected at the palace. Many people were very upset in the Philippines, and they left the Beatles with no security, and they narrowly escaped the country.
We did the concert. The next morning, we were in bed, and somebody knocked on our door of the hotel suite saying, "Come on, you're supposed to be at the palace." And we said, "No, we're not. We didn't have any engagement." And they said, "Turn on the TV." We turned the television on, and there it was, this big palace with lines of people. And the guy saying, "Well, they're still not here yet." But we were never supposed to be there. And so what they did was they said, "Beatles snub first family." And so consequently, he set the mob on us and tried to beat us up, which they did. They beat up a lot of people with us and wouldn't let the airplane leave Manila until Epstein, our manager, had to get off the plane and give back the money we earned at the concert.
Number 8. The Beatles are bigger than Jesus. In a 1966 interview, John Lennon said that the Beatles were more popular than Jesus. In ungodly Britain, this remark didn't cause any controversy whatsoever. However, when the interview was printed on an American magazine, people went crazy, especially in the south of the country, where radio DJs encouraged their audience to burn Beatles records. John Lennon later had to apologize and said that what he actually meant was that young people are more influenced by rock and roll than by religion, which was perfectly true. The 1966 tour was not fun for the Beatles, who decided to make it their last tour.
You know, but I'm not saying that we're better or greater or comparing us with Jesus Christ as a person or God as a thing or whatever it is. You know, I just said what I said and it was wrong.
Number 9. In 1965, the Beatles made headlines when they refused to play for segregated audiences. When the Beatles were touring America, they were asked to play for racially divided crowds. They insisted to play for integrated audiences. This was seen as a bold stand against racial segregation during the civil rights movement. Many people admired them for that, but the racists didn't quite like it. And finally, number 10, the Beatles breakup. Why did the Beatles break up? I don't know, I ask myself that question every day. Basically, the first Beatle to leave the band was technically Ringo Starr. It was during a session when, allegedly, Paul McCartney was being horrible. Ringo had enough and left the band. The other Beatles sent him a letter saying, "You're the best rock and roll drummer in the world, please come back," something like that, and Ringo was happy to join the group again. The second Beatle to leave the group was George Harrison, and you can see that actually in the Get Back documentary. The atmosphere in the studio was one of tension, and he had enough. He said, "I think I'll be leaving the band." "When?" John asked. "Now." And then he just walked out. Of course, he ended up rejoining the group. But the person who finally decided to break up the Beatles was John Lennon. It was during a meeting when he just let everyone know that he'll be leaving the Beatles. After that, he said to Yoko, "Okay, I'm done with these guys. From now on, it's just you and me." However, the public didn't know about the Beatles breakup until Paul McCartney released his first solo album titled McCartney, which was accompanied by an interview with questions like, "Are you planning another album with the Beatles?" Answer, "No." The next day, all the headlines read, "Paul quits the Beatles." Now, why did the Beatles break up? Well, many reasons really. The main reason is probably Alan Klein. Alan Klein was an American music manager who had managed artists like the Rolling Stones. He was known in New York for being an absolute bastard. a dodgy character who would do anything to get what he wanted. Somehow, John and Yoko really liked him, and they decided he would be the new Beatles manager. Paul McCartney, however, did not want Alan Klein as his manager. He wanted his father-in-law, Mr. Eastman, to manage the Beatles. He was a lawyer who specialized in the music business. John and the other Beatles didn't want the Eastmans to take over Apple Corps and the Beatles because basically they were Paul's family, so it wouldn't have been fair. Paul was outvoted and Alan Klein became the Beatles manager. Paul didn't want anything to do with Alan Klein, but unfortunately for him, he was still part of Apple Records. And the only way to get out of the label was to sue the Beatles, which he ended up doing. Some people blame Yoko Ono for the Beatles' breakup. I don't think she was responsible for the breakup, but it is true that their continuous presence in the studio was a major source of tension for the band, and her powerful influence on John Lennon made John focus on other things rather than the band. Okay, so this is pretty much it for now. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. You can also follow me on Instagram or Facebook. There is a PayPal link for donations. Of course, every donation will be absolutely appreciated. You can also buy my book. Actually, that would make me very happy indeed. Or the free option is just to subscribe to this YouTube channel and maybe click on the bell icon so you're the first to know when I upload new videos. Thank you for watching. See you next time. Bye.
Well, I'm afraid that's us run out of time.
Oh,
I'm really
okay.
sorry.
Oh,
So,
bye, everyone.
thank you very much
Thank you.
If I give my heart to you, I must be